what are we going to do? I'm going to start by making the kitchen unit. I have poplar plywood for that, 15mm stick. I've had custom drawers made. The empty boxes from Blum, sink, cooktop, veneer, electric locks. I'll come back to that later. I think it's going to be fun. Well, those are basically the main components. So let's get started. Of course, I first made a proper drawing of it. What is it going to look like? The countertop with the cooktop, sink with grooves to drain the water. There will also be a little compartment here for oil. Here you can see the top view of the sink. These are the drawers. There will also be a little door at the back. Here are the drawers, and here as well a door for the sink, where I'll also handle all the waterworks. So the water pump and the pressure tank, I'm going to put those in there. 4 drawers, not too deep, but plenty of space. Here you can see the view with the drawers. That will become a block, which I will cover with elm wood. And I'm going to make the countertop out of solid surface and Corian, or in this case, Himax. So a solid material with which you can do anything. And I'm going torso another cross section at the front. You can actually see that here. I'm going to let it rest on the step board, so I'll leave it here. Here there's a sliding door, and I'll let it continue down to the bottom or to the step board. So here is the bottom of the van floor, and the step board. I'm going to let that run through. There's a little door here, and I think I'm going to make a small compartment or a shelf here, but I'll have to see how that turns out. Well, a plan is of course wonderful, but I've also put together a sort of setup to see what it will actually look like in the van. This is roughly the height and dimensions of the kitchen unit. And then I'll still have 1.40 m left for the bed. That actually seems just fine to me, honestly. So I'm going to go ahead and build it exactly the way I've drawn it out here, just as I planned. I don't see any reason to make changes. So I'll stick with this design. These are the panels that have arrived. So poplar plywood with Dutch Elm veneer on top. My favorite type of wood. 2 double-sided and 2 single-sided panels, and 1 sheet of veneer paper. They all come from the same bundle. So that actually means all from the same trunk of the same tree. And that means the veneer paper will match the veneered panels very closely, making it all one cohesive whole. First, I'll attach the rounded edge to the side. I'm going to attach it with lamello and glue. First, I'll mark it out, and then use the mellow from the underside, because there's a thickness difference between the 15mm poplar plywood and the okome plywood bends, which are thicker. That's why I align the bottom so that the outside is flush and the difference disappears on the inside. You won't see that anymore later. We're going to assemble it using lamello. I'm doing that with lamello number 20, and the 20 actually stands for 20mm. That means it's 20mm or 2 centimeters wide in the middle. There is also a smaller biscuit, number 10, biscuit 0. If you have less thickness or want to use a different application for gluing, I have also made some templates. First, I made some fitting templates for gluing, because you can use a clamp, you can put a glue clamp on it. For that curve, you need a little trick to still be able to press it together. So I made some small templates from scrap material, and I'm going to use those to glue it together. Then I'll assemble it again with regular yellow wood glue. It dries quickly and is extremely strong. You can put the glue clamp on it, and then that way you can be sure that the curves are also perpendicular to the side. Otherwise you'll run into problems later with the rest of the kitchen unit. I'll assemble the rest of the kitchen unit in the same way, also using biscuits. I do make sure to pre-drill all of those neatly. I use screws that are 3.5 by 45 millimeters, and then I use a 2.5 millimeter drill bit for the pilot holes. That's especially important with plywood, not because the wood will split, but the screw will always take the path of least resistance, and it can end up following a certain layer in the plywood, causing the wood to shift and not stay exactly where you want it. Of course, we're only talking about tenths of a millimeter, but it still ends up being much less precise, right? In the countertop, I also make a few cutouts for the cooktop and the sink for the tray that will be installed. You always have to saw carefully because you need to remove the riving knife, otherwise you can't lower the blade in, and you have to move the guard aside for a moment. So you always have to saw with extra caution, but then you end up with really clean holes in your countertop. You could also do it with the plunge saw, but I prefer this method. I just happen to have a saw, and I find it a bit easier and neater than using the plunge saw. It's not visible work, but it's still convenient if it's already done. Before I assemble the kitchen unit later, I'm going to oil it first. Mainly because later on there will be a lot of spots that are really hard to reach, so to speak. So then it's just a matter of wiping off the oil, and once that's dry, the kitchen unit can be glued together. Another advantage is that even if I spill some glue later, or if some glue seeps out of the seams, it won't adhere as well to the oiled wooden sides. So it soaks in less, which means you can easily remove it again. I also made a hole in the bottom under the drawer. That saves a bit of weight. And I made a bunch of holes for the gas line, the water line, and for some electrical wiring that will go through the unit. From experience, I know those always need to be there later on, so I've already taken care of that in advance. Then I still have all the options to go from one side to the other with all my piping. Before I assembled it, I also attached all the hinge plates with a small raised edge that you can see there. And that's because those hinges are designed for 18mm fronts, but now they're all 15, so the hinge size no longer matches up. And that's why I added a small thickening to still reach an 18mm thickness, so to speak. Once it's fully assembled, I can start cutting the veneer paper and the veneer. Then, with careful attention, you very precisely match the veneer to the drawer fronts, making sure everything lines up perfectly. And then, finally, the drawers can go in. I had pre-drilled the drawer size, so the drawers go in. Cutting the veneer paper and veneer for the front, and then arranging them to see how they look best together. Marking it out. Now I want the front, the door, and the flap at the front to have the veneer pattern continue seamlessly across the front. So I have a 3mm gap between the front and the frame. So that means I actually want to leave 1.5 millimeters on each side, and that has to be done very precisely. So that way I can also more easily and carefully separate the fronts from the frame. That's actually a bit easier than putting the fronts into the frame right away. I glued the veneer paper with aluminum strips because it has to be so precise where the holes go. You start very precisely by positioning it so that the holes line up exactly, and then you slowly slide it into place. Remove the aluminum, and you always have to be careful that it doesn't touch the glued area, because then it will stick immediately and you won't be able to get it off anymore. And you need to make sure to press it down very evenly from one side to avoid bubbles or dents so that it adheres properly. For that I use an old-fashioned veneer hammer, which is a kind of hammer with a very wide flat side to press down firmly. Then it's just a matter of cutting out the inside. I do that with a veneer saw and a utility knife. Then the fronts can be put on. The advantage of the fronts is that you can still adjust them in 3 directions. And this is how it turned out, with 2 rounded edges. A little door with a fairly large compartment inside. This side. And a flap where you can store whatever, your slippers or something like that, or your shoes. I just painted the edge black. That's because later on the countertop, I'll align it with the outside, and then you'll get a kind of black edge of about 3 millimeters in between, which makes the countertop stand out a bit from the kitchen. I also think that looks much nicer, especially from a distance. With a large compartment. That's where the sink is. The pipes that still need to be connected, the sink, and of course the drawers. With nice, plush, soft, luxurious, and comfortable mat inside for even more comfort and relaxation. Soft close, of course. I've installed a central locking system on that. That's also from Blum, as you can see here. There's a small movable latch attached here. It fits into a holder inside the cabinet. That also means that when I open this drawer, the other drawers are locked. And they're mounted here on a little rail. And by moving this up and down, I can lock all the drawers. And I'm going to find a way to do that with an electronic holder so that I can operate it electrically. Hold on. I still need to install the electronic lock, but I have to work that out a bit more. The next thing I want to show you is how to make the handles, how you can do that yourself in a really nice way. but I made a separate video about that. So see you next time, and thanks for watching.
So